What up everyone, Shark here, welcome back to the channel. Whether you're an RTS veteran or brand new to the genre, Broken Arrow has a lot of very specific in-game mechanics that are not completely transparent to the user. So what I've done here is I've broken down every single combat game mechanic and explained it for you. There will be timestamps and chapters in the description below. Please hit me up in the comments if you think I missed anything. I will make future videos that revolve more around the specific micro you need to take advantage of some of these tactics. But without further ado, let's get to it. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is resource income. Obviously, in the deployment phase, you start with 1,000 manpower and 0 income. As soon as the deployment phase ticks over, you'll start with plus 300 a minute, and that amount will go down based on the units you have on the field. So it starts with plus 300. Now, as my aircraft arrives and all those units deploy, it goes down. This is upkeep. So the way this game is designed is once you reach half of your deck strength, or about 5,000 points worth of units on the field, your income will be 0 and it's linear from there. All right, let's talk about moving your units. I have the Humvee selected. If I right click, the unit will move directly to wherever I click, going straight line, going through forest. If it's amphibious, going across water. If I hit R and then left click, it'll follow the same movement rules, but it'll move backwards. This is really important when you have armored vehicles and you want to keep their high frontal armor towards the enemy. If you want your vehicle to take the fastest route, you hit F and then left click. They will immediately move to the nearest road and they will take the fastest route to the destination. The last piece, if you hit Q, which this vehicle can't do because it doesn't have weapons, and left click, that'll work like a regular movement order, except it's an attack move, so your unit will stop to engage targets along the way. If you don't want your unit to stop, then just use the right-click move order. It's also worth noting that you can queue up move orders by holding shift, so I'm just going to have my Humvee do a little loop here. I'm going to have it back up, then shift, then right-click, and you'll watch the Humvee will follow this path. You can also combine this with other kinds of move orders, so reverse, direct move, fast move, etc. Now let's talk about vehicle criticals. The game does a really good job of laying this out in the tutorial, but essentially there are 4 different capabilities for each one of your vehicles and units. There's optics, mobility, targeting, and loading. When you see red, that means the capability is basically destroyed. For example, red mobility means your vehicle can't move, whereas when it's yellow, they are degraded. You can repair your vehicles with supplies. The easiest way to do this, go to your hangar, choose support, identify your supply element, then hold shift and click. It will fill the vehicle. Tell it where you want it to move. In this case, because it's entering the battlefield, it's coming on a fast move. If you hit U, it will unload the supplies on point. The supplies have a small radius around them, so when you drop them off, you will see these tanks start to repair themselves. You can also move vehicles to supplies to have them repair, or you can drop supplies next to them. It's worth noting, you see the little repair icon here. Also, if the vehicle is low on ammunition, you can see it sometimes down here in the data display. Other times you'll see what looks like a munitions or a loading icon above the tank, indicating that it is out of munitions. One cool thing with supplies is you can actually pack up supplies back into the vehicle and move them around. You can even use cargo vehicles and helicopters to consolidate multiple supply outputs and put them into a larger supply package and move them closer to the front line. Believe it or not, as long as your teammate hasn't disabled supply sharing in their settings, you can pack up their supplies as well and move them forward. So if one teammate is actively managing the supply situation, like in an arranged team, everyone else can kind of let it go and let that teammate execute. And as always, here's a friendly reminder, be careful with your supply depots. Don't have too many units around them at one time. If the enemy sees them, they'll usually target them, and the explosion that happens when the supplies are hit is usually enough to knock out any vehicles in the radius. Oh, and the other fun thing is you can capture your opponent's supplies, usually pretty good for supporting really deep strikes into your enemy's rear lines. Helicopters and trucks follow basically the same movement rules as ground units. Right now, it is considered to be at high altitude. You can change his altitude, in which case he'll fly even lower and go in and around trees, but that significantly reduces movement speed. To pick up a unit or a package of supplies, just right click on the unit. In this case, I'm going to pick up its altitude so it moves a little bit faster. As long as the unit or supply size can fit within the helicopter's capacity and lift cargo allowance, it can move the unit. And just a reminder, shift queuing move orders is the most efficient way of doing business. So in this case, I'm going to tell it at high altitude to move as fast as possible. Tell it to unload here using the U command. And then because I want to get this tutorial over as fast as possible, I hold shift and I tell it to move back to the helipad. Here, I'm just going to demonstrate an airdrop. I have a C-130J Hercules. When you call this in, you click on the item, and then you can choose the units that you want to go in it. In this case, I have a handful of airborne, some tows, and some stingers. And we're going to watch as I hit O and I drew this line, all of these units are going to deploy from the Hercules in that line there. Once the airdrop's complete, I'm going to tell him to stay low and return to base. Now these units are on the ground. This is a quick way to deploy units. You can also use this to deploy units on the flanks very, very effectively. Let's talk about stealth. Stealth statistics are also visible in the armory. So in this case, I have a 4-post, a Russian drone. You can hear its baseline optics value is 2000, which means it'll normally detect units with no line of sight obstructions at 2000 meters. Here, you can see that the stealth rating of the Ranger snipers is a 3, which means that this 2000 is divided by 3, give you about 670 meters of detection if the Rangers are out in the open. Units being in cover increases their stealth rating by 2, and then line of sight is another pretty significant consideration in this game. So in this case, you can see by holding down left alt and hovering over the point what the scout snipers can see from this spot. The next is the fact that they're in cover, indicated by these tree icons. That automatically doubles their resistance to detection. If they go further into the cover, they get additional protection. So worth noting, it's not just that you want to be in the trees, you want to be in the trees where you can see but as far back as possible to make sure that you are concealed from the enemy. When using recon units, I also highly recommend that you use H to put them on hold fire, indicated by this red no shoot icon. They will return fire if fired upon, but they will not fire initially, and that will help them maintain their stealth. Finally, when crossing open ground, you can use Z, which is the sprint or afterburner key, to help them move from cover to cover. All right, it's time to talk about weapon penetration and armor mechanics in Broken Arrow. So as you can see, I have an M1A2 SEP and the T15 Barbarous pinned here. Every vehicle has 2 different armor ratings for each location: top, rear, side, and front. White is used to measure kinetic armor protection, and orange is used to measure high explosive armor protection. The way the damage is actually calculated is a little complicated, but essentially you look at the penetration value of the weapon and compare it to the armor and the location where it is hitting. If the penetration value for kinetic projectile is above the armor rating, it will do full damage. If it is less than but above 50%, it'll do reduced damage, and if it is below 50%, then it will do no damage at all. Note that most kinetic projectiles get a penetration bonus at short range. In this case, if the Abrams shot at the front armor of the Barbarous, because it's about 60% the Barbarous's armor rating of 850, you'd expect to see about 30% damage. So looking at 6 overall damage, you would do 2 damage to the Barbarous, and you would need 9 shots to the front for the Abrams to kill it. However, if you get onto the side of the tank, 525 penetration, much greater than 150, it will do the full 6 damage per shot, so 3 hits should kill the Barbarous. On the high explosive side, the range doesn't matter. It does a flat penetration check against the armor. The damage done, however, is based on a bell curve. So in this case, the Cornet here from the Barbarous does 1200 damage compared to the 1400 front armor protection on the Abrams. If they were the same, they were equal, the Cornet would do half of its damage. If the Cornet was much greater than the armor, say if you hit the Abrams on the side or on the rear, it will do full damage, and if it's much less, it will do 0 damage. In this case, because it's just under 50% of the Abrams armor value, I would expect this to do just under 50% damage, so looking at about 6 damage points, meaning that the Abrams can survive 2 shots from the Cornet on the frontal armor. However, The top, rear, and side armor are significantly lower than the 1200 penetration, which means that this cornet would do 13 damage per shot, so the second shot on either one of those locations would almost certainly kill the Abrams. Now, what's nice about the different munitions in this game is the units will choose the munition that is likely to do the most damage to the target. In this case, you can see the Abrams is choosing a sabot round, and you can see the penetration increase as we get closer. And with the increase in penetration, the estimated damage to those vehicles. In this case, you can see the tank doing the calculations that against the BTR training targets, it wants to use the high explosive ammunition, and against the tank, it wants to use the sabot because of the higher penetration. The armory screen also shows whether or not vehicles have active protection listed here and smoke listed here. These are limited use that can be resupplied. Active protection will actually destroy incoming projectiles with about a 5-second cooldown, so they do no damage. Smoke breaks line of sight. It'll affect guided munitions, but not dumb or kinetic munitions and their ability to hit. Please note that if you change the armor package, like here on the Abrams, it'll actually show by upgrading this armor package, which costs 105 points. It increases the side armor significantly and adds the active protection, which is highlighted here. You can hit X to pop smoke. It basically breaks the line of sight, but does not guarantee that it'll stop the munition. So guided munitions, when they can't see, will typically miss or go dumb, but straight fire munitions like rockets will ignore the smoke, keep plowing on through. So normally I like to pair a smoke with a movement order. There we go. Pop smoke, reverse back. That'll help defend the vehicle for a little bit. Smoke lasts about 20 to 30 seconds. But once they break through that line of sight, your vehicle is vulnerable again. In this case, the striker does not have additional smoke. If your infantry end up in combat, you can hit the unload key twice to have them do a rapid dismount. You can also have your infantry pop smoke to break line of sight and sprint to close with the enemy. Now you see the shocked and then sometimes panicked modifiers here. These are panicked or suppressed. When you see this, it means your units are performing less effectively. You can help fix this by getting them into cover or popping smoke to break line of sight. With some units like elite infantry, sprinting also improves their resilience to suppression and panic. All right, let's talk about fire missions. Here, you hit the T button to open the fire mission menu. I have my artillery unit selected. Down here in this corner, you can choose whether you want to use HE, smoke, smart munitions, the duration of the strike, and the mode. And so let's say I want to throw smoke down the screen for an advance. That's point. I can have my other mortars drop smoke in a line like this. Now, in this case, the computer's given us a Striker RV with laser designation. So as part of the fire mission controls for additional accuracy, I can choose the smart munitions, and I can have those mortars use the smart munitions there. Sometimes with certain munitions, you're going to use P to choose precision strike. But now these mortar rounds will hit very accurately as the rounds are guided in on the target. Yep. And you see the laser designation. You do have to still get the precision strike in the rough spot. You see the rounds will try to adjust based on the laser. For precision strikes, you need two things. You need a laser designation using the hotkey N, and then you need a precision strike, not a bombing or a strafing run. So you want to use the key P. So in this case, I'm going to have my Eagle fly over here. I'm going to tell it to laser designate the target. Once it comes back around towards the target, I hit P. The airplane's going to come around and make the drop run now. And you see the bomb guides its way in on the laser. You want to give your airplane space. In fact, I normally recommend that you don't have a plane spot for itself. Instead, I recommend that you have another unit designate, because the airplane does require a little bit of a straight line before it can actually conduct the run. With this example with the moving target, you want to try to predict roughly where the vehicle will be, even though it's designated, because that designation will only basically allow it to make minor corrections. There's the bomb, and that's how you do a precision strike. Now, I want to highlight a specific technique used for precision launch munitions like ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. You can see here I have two ATACMs available to me. If I want to fire both on slightly different targets, what I can do is hit the P key twice. You'll see both are queued up. And now when I click twice, those are two different aim points. Both missiles will fire, one each at each aim point. Now, this works the same for airplanes and their cruise missiles. Something like a B-52 can sport a lot of cruise missiles. So in this case, I can queue up all 12 and just have them hit everything. Now, each missile will require its own aim time, but you'll see the B-52 will come on target and start unloading all of its missiles. As it gets shot down by the AI's air defenses. But still, pretty cool and a good way to keep your plane in the back line and have it just absolutely demolish the enemy. I know this is just a training mission, but this is a good example of how to bring in your aircraft and set up gun runs. In this case, I know I want to do my gun run in line with the target. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring the Thunderbolt around using a shift Q move order to get it in line, keeping it at low altitude so it evades detection. Then once it is roughly lined up, I'm going to initiate the strafing run by hitting K and then drawing the strafing run I want it to take. At this point, the aircraft will make any minor adjustments that it needs. Then when it's on target, you'll see the aircraft is going to climb up into position. It's going to launch Mavericks and use its gun. So it'll use all of its weapons that don't require laser designation when using this technique. Bombing runs work much the same, except the hotkey is L instead of K. The aircraft will again conduct minor adjustments, line up, come to high altitude or low altitude if required, and drop the bombs. A good reminder here is that airplanes have to be returned to base before they run out of fuel. You have to tell them to do so, otherwise if they run out of fuel, the pilot will eject and the airplane will crash. Most air defense weapons will have radar. Radar expands vision for high-flying targets by a factor of 2, and against low-flying targets and helicopters by 25%, but it does make the unit vulnerable to SEAD or counter-radar missiles. Radars take 5 seconds to turn on, but can be turned off instantaneously to help you defend against anti-radiation missiles. Large systems like the Patriot have to be stationary to use the radar, whereas other systems like the Avenger and some with stabilization can use the radar while moving. Right, now let's talk ECM and jamming with airplanes. As you can see, this F-16 starts with 15 decoys. Decoys basically give a coin flip chance when you deploy them that the missile will continue to track or go for the decoy. You can also upgrade several aircraft with ECM. In this case, you see 10% here from the ECM pod. That is just a flat 10% reduction in the odds that a missile targeting your aircraft will hit it. So when you combine ECM, target size, and decoys, as well as good use of low altitude maneuver and the afterburner, you can keep your airplanes live longer than you would expect. All right, that is it. That is all I've got for you. If I missed anything, again, please hit me up in the comments below and I will revisit this in the next couple of weeks. That's going to do it for us here, and we'll see y'all in the next one.